What up, everybody? Washington's got a QB1 for the 2022 season, and he wears number 2. That may be the end of the cool number stuff. If you're fired up for Carson Wentz, I think that's okay. If you're not, I think that's okay. I find myself somewhere in the middle, and my biggest questions aren't about what he can do on the field. This is the Washington Football Talk podcast. My name is JP Finlay. We're brought to you by Oarsman Automotive of Virginia. We ride with them. Want you to do the exact same thing. Mitch, Tischler, Pete Hailey are here. So I was live on air with like 90 seconds left in the radio show when this news broke. And it was just so staggering that I'm like we were probably just dead air for 30 seconds because everybody was just kind of reacting. And I immediately texted a couple of people just to try to make sure, everything was correct. Not that Schefter's ever wrong, but you still got to do the job. And my initial reaction was blah. I eventually talked myself into the Alex Smith trade, but my initial reaction was blah. My initial reaction to this thing was blah, and I've kind of talked myself into it. I like that it's only a 1-year rental if they need it to be. I like that they still have the 11th pick. There's things I like about it. From on-field perspective, it's an upgrade from Taylor Heineke. I'm not sure they were going to be able to find that otherwise definitively. But the off-field stuff is what terrifies me. Indy just traded a first and a third for this dude. Indy has the coach that he had his most success with in Philly, in Frank Reich. Indy does not have an heir apparent to Carson Wentz. And yet, despite all of that, they wanted to get rid of this dude. So that is by far my biggest reservation on this. I think you guys may want to press it a little harder. I think Wentz as a player is volatile. There's some really, really ugly stuff, but there's some good stuff too. He's more accurate. He doesn't turn it over as much. I'm not here to sell you. I ain't used car salesmaning this thing. I get not being happy. I get being told for months about a big swing and then landing with this, which is kind of like maybe an infield single, perhaps, like a little weak dribbler that the shortstop can't get to in time, or maybe bobbles. I don't know, man. They want butts and seats. This ain't going to do it.
You know what this is, JP? We talk about it all the time. The offseason started with Washington walking into the casino, a lot of cash in their hands, super excited, sitting down at a blackjack table, threw a couple $100 bets down, see if they could get Aaron Rodgers, see if they could get Russ Wilson, see if they could make a big splash. None of those came through. They turned around, ran to the ATM at 1 a.m, are yanking out cash, hoping they can make a late night run. That's what this Carson Wentz trade is. Carson Wentz is better than Taylor Heineke. There's no question, but he's not better than what you could have gotten, considering that you're paying him $28 million. You're giving up 2 third-round picks. You're swapping picks in the second round. Carson Wentz is the most average quarterback there is. And you can talk about his completion percentage and his 27, his touchdown to interception ratio in Indianapolis. He had the best offensive line and the best running back in football last year. He wasn't asked to do anything. He didn't have to go out and win football games himself. And in one of the games that he had to do it, in the last game of the season against Jacksonville, when his defense essed the bed, he did the same thing. He couldn't go out and win them a football game when they needed it to make the playoffs. All this talk about Jimmy G's a winner, Jimmy G's a winner. This dude ain't a winner. He's not a winner. He's not a particularly good quarterback. He's never been asked to do anything. This is a terrible trade, and I will not be talked into it unless I see him start going out throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns on Sundays in the fall.
All right, Mitchell. Yeah.
You should have just gotten right to the terrible trade. Whatever your poker analogy was early, just get to the bones here. Less analogies, more bones.
Yeah, Mitch is wearing Eagles green, but he's clearly not supporting this trade. I don't agree with it either. I mean, I get it. I get for Ron, a coach who's had 7 wins in the last 2 seasons. He needs a quarterback as an upgrade. Wentz is an upgrade. I get it for Washington. They can still draft a quarterback. They can get rid of Wentz in a year. But when you acquire someone and you're immediately hyping up the fact that he can be gotten rid of easily, and that's one of your first primary selling points, then that certainly speaks to the quality of the guy you're getting. To me, Mitch, I think your Jimmy G comparison was good. He's Jimmy G without the win-loss record. I think we'll be back in the spot 12 months from now, looking at another option. But look, I understand it. Doesn't mean I like it, though. I certainly do not like it. I think Wentz is probably my least favorite guy of all the names we've mentioned on this podcast month after month because of his injury history, because of his production issues. I think his Pro Football Reference page is a big fat lie. I think that 27-7 touchdown to interception ratio is super fake. And sure, he can maybe help Washington get to 8 or 9 wins. I don't think he does much more than that, but at least Ron can say, look, we got someone, we tried, here's a new quarterback. And I understand it from his perspective.
Yeah, man, I in no way do I like it. I suppose I can say I get it. I just, the on-field stuff and just the eye test, man. Like, what was the Thursday night game against the Titans when he threw that god-awful pick six out in the end zone?
Yeah, he has a couple of those. He has a couple just like interceptions that make Taylor Heineke look like the most judicious quarterback of all time. There's some real,
and Heineke's
like,
at least trying to make plays. This dude, like, Heineke's so volatile. This dude averaged 209 a game in 17 games. Like, with to Mitch's point, with one of the best O-lines, the best running back, good weapons, a good defense,
a coach who knew him, all that stuff. Playing in a dome for 8 games a year.
We were talking about Jordan Love and kind of
like making this about domes is pretty awesome.
We were talking about Jordan Love and how the Packers weren't talking particularly highly of him, you know, when he got a chance to play in practices or whatever. The Colts went to the podium last week. Chris Ballard, their GM, and couldn't have been harsher on Carson Wentz. My mind is blown here. I think I would have rather had Andy Dalton next year and kept the draft picks and saved a little bit of that money and used a little bit of that money elsewhere than made this deal.
So Mitch, JP and I at least get it. We don't like it. We get it. You seem to hate it, but do you get it? I'm sure you do, but
sure,
do you not like the fact that they gave up the picks? What's your biggest issue here?
It's the giving up the picks. It's the amount of money that they're going to give them for the 1 year. It's kind of all of it. And
I don't care the money for 1 year. I care the picks. I rank what you care about most, and we'll go line by line.
The picks is number one for me. Money is
a pair of thirds.
Yeah.
One of them should be a compensatory, right? It should be what they get back from share.
Sure, fine.
But
they would have had an extra third without it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, relay the whole story. But yeah.
And
it's
one
this
of those
third
thirds,
and next third, right?
But then one of those thirds can become a 2 if he plays 70% of snaps, which is similar to what the Eagles got when Carson played that many for the Colts.
Which also would not allow that to be a compensatory because compensatory is locked in.
Right. So, yes. So it's decent.
Not to mention you can't trade a future compensatory. Like, you don't know that you're going to get that.
Right. I mean, listen, I get it. I get it for Ron. Like you guys said, I understand why they made the deal. I just don't like it very much. I agree. I think he's a better quarterback than Heineke. I don't think comparatively to what they gave up, he is. And yeah, I think next year you're going to see them. You could see them win potentially 8, 9, maybe 10 games in this now 17 game season, kind of make the playoffs. But I think it puts you no closer to trying to compete for a Super Bowl than you were before. In fact, I think it takes you a step back. It's the same thing I said when we were talking about trading for Jimmy Garoppolo. I think it's the same sort of situation that it'll help you in the short term a little bit, but what you end up giving up, I think, hurts you more long term.
Yeah, and
I don't care about the contract. That's what quarterbacks cost. I like that it's a 1 year. You can get out of this thing, and next year's QB class is supposed to be much better. But who the hell knows? These things are so fluid. I think you have a really good point there, Mitchell, that I don't believe if you're looking at a macro view 5 years from now, is Washington closer to being a Super Bowl contender? Because I don't think any of us believe they were this year with Heineke or with Wentz. And I do think you're right that 2 steps backwards, even if it's a pair of third round picks, those can be Terry McLaurin or they can be De'Ami Brown. Like, you don't know what they're going to be, but I don't think this accelerates your contending for a title at all. Frankly, I've been saying it. I really want the Washington win total to slip next year. Now it probably won't happen, but I was hoping it would be 6.5 or 7. And I was going to bet the hell out of it, regardless of quarterback, because I think this is an 8 or 9 win team if you substitute the quarterbacks they played last year for the quarterbacks they're going to face this year. I think they're an 8 or 9 win team. With Wentz, maybe I feel like it's a firm 9, but if the win total comes in at 8.5 or 9, no thanks. I'll wait and see. He won They go 8-9 or 7-10 in Indy.
They were 9-8 in Indy last
9
year.
and 8, but the Jags lost what knocked them out. Right. Sorry.
Right. JP, I know you said you don't want to do comparisons. I'm going to do a quick one. This kind of makes me think of the Wizards deal for Porzingis. Like, okay, you get a new guy in there and you might be able to see what this nucleus can do, but it in no way makes you more relevant in the grand scheme of things. So yes, Washington had to make a move at quarterback and they did, but it's just kind of, and it's a boring cliche, moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. This thing is still not really going anywhere. It's still sinking. It might just be a different alignment of chairs as opposed to what you're going to go with Heineke. Now, hopefully they can still draft a guy, and then maybe you have him as a long-term option. You can develop him at a better pace because Wentz is there as a placeholder and Heineke is too. But it just
– I think at 11 now you're looking wide out or corner.
And that's what the problem is. Because you're compounding this problem, like Pete said. I think at 11 you probably can't take a quarterback there. If they end up taking a quarterback at 11, then maybe I would rethink the fervor with which I'm against this trade. But because you went and got Wentz, and arguably he might make you, like you said, from a firm 9-win team-ish, somewhere in that middle ground, you're going to be picking 10 to 15 next year, 10 to 18 next year. And
yeah, I don't care about that. If you identify the guy you want,
if your argument is that
trade to move up,
but if your argument is that next year's quarterback class is so much better, you have less assets now to trade up next year because you gave away at least one in that third round pick next year, and you're going to be further back in the draft.
Presumably. By far, the thing that bothers me the most is whatever the hell has gone on in Philadelphia and in Indianapolis that people want this guy gone. Like, I mean, he's got a big arm. He's not the athlete he once was. I think his footwork's pretty sloppy. I think if you go back and watch or you talk to someone like scouts around the league, they'll tell you, I've heard back and forth from players like him or players think he can be a little bit divisive. I've texted with some Washington coaches. They seem upbeat on it. I may throw up in my mouth a little bit for the next month when we get this man, we are so thrilled to have this guy speech out of Ashburn from a number of different people, because it's not true. It's not what you wanted at first. It's just like we've heard for 2 months, big swing, big swing, big swing. Now you end up with Carson Wentz, which also means, and perhaps they'll prove to be right on this. Like the situation is so murky and so troubled that who the hell knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, but they're out on Watson. Houston, the missing piece in a Watson trade, I don't believe is Carson Wentz. I think Houston's going to try their own rookie. They're going to try this Davis Mills kid. And I don't know, man. To me, Ron's job is to try to get better and win games this year, which is where perhaps the intersection of head coach and general manager takes a real problematic turn, because the GM is supposed to be looking to make this thing a long-term championship team. And I asked Mayhew that in Indy. I was like, dude, are your goals ever not succinct? And Mayhew was like, dude, I got to win this year too, or I'll be gone. So cool, but sure as hell seems like we're playing this year to year, and it leads me to think a year or two away from a year or two away in perpetuity.
In perpetuity, indeed. Let's try. Obviously, none of us are liking this. JP just talked about throwing up in his mouth, which is not an indicator of happiness and positivity. Let's say Wentz replicates the 27-7 with Washington. Let's try and spin it. Not that we need to spin it, but let's try and look at this if it pays off. What's the ceiling? 10-11 wins and a playoff victory, and maybe that makes it a success, and then you keep him around. But I think he's proven to be too inconsistent to really deliver on a year-to-year basis. So even if he does play well this year, then you got to wonder, is he good enough to do it again?
I think if he can stay healthy. The 2020 season, I think, just went nuclear for him in Philly. I think all the locker room stuff came to a head. I think everything went bad. I think the fact that Nick Foles won that Super Bowl and not him was always the sticking point. And then they draft Jalen Hurts. There's a million things, right? He's not going to have that this season in Washington. Last year, the numbers will tell you he's better than he was, but the numbers are still good. I mean, look, Taylor doubled him up in INTs and threw fewer touchdowns by a couple. Maybe if Taylor threw half of the interceptions, they would have won a couple more games. Think about the Eagles game at the end of the year when Heineke was trying to take him back down the field and threw that back-breaking pick. Not to sliding doors this thing too far, but it is possible Wentz is good this season for Washington. I don't think it's possible he's great. I don't think it's possible he's a game changer. But I don't want to sound overly negative on this thing either. Like, he's put together one really damn good season. Then he blew out his knee, and then he was chasing that athleticism, and I think it wasn't there. I still think his footwork's sloppy. He was with his guy in Frank Reich last year, and Frank Reich just sent him packing. That to me, I can't get over that. Like, you know how, like, if you're when you're in college or whatever, and you're dating somebody and they cheat on you and you try to get back together, and then you're like, you cheated on me. Like, I can't do this. Why did Indy just throw you out of town?
So your analogy is okay, but mine was bad.
It wasn't the lead of the podcast. I think it was a little different.
My whole point is that in a short-term view, it's fine. You might see a little bit of a bump next year, and yeah, he's going to be better than Heineke, but pretty much any of the veteran free agent quarterbacks that were available were going to be better than what Heineke gave you last year. My issue is that this offseason, we've been yelling about it for 6 months. Ron and Martin Mayhew have been talking about it, is to find your franchise quarterback. And they didn't do that. And not only did they not do it, but I think they actively set themselves back from potentially doing that in the draft as well. And to me, that's a problem. And to me, that's where the negativity comes from. Next year, we're going to see a more, knock on wood, we're going to see a more competent quarterback taking snaps under center at FedEx Field. But does winning one or two more games next year help you get to where you want to be? If you're the head coach of the team and strictly worried about winning games to look good for the owner next year, then yeah, it does. But for a fan base and for a front office and an ownership group and an organization that isn't trying to just make the playoffs, they want more than that. They have higher aspirations than just having one 10-win season every 5 years and have an opportunity to maybe host a playoff game. It doesn't help you get there, and that's why I don't like it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's what Ron needs right now. Like, this team is desperate for the 10-win pop, and this could be a great time for them to get it. But it's just disappointing because it feels like this trade is like a year too late. Like, if they did this last year, coming off of wild card berth, you're looking to take that next step. Carson is a great middle step to get you to the upper echelon. But now it's a year too late. It almost feels like Ron is reacting 12 months past what he should be. And this should be the offseason when he goes young or takes the big swing. But because of what happened the year before and what he took on with Smith and Haskins, he just has kind of been behind at all times with his passing, signal caller decisions. And this feels like the third example of that. JP, what are you laughing about over there?
Stupid stuff. I like this situation, honestly. Like, you're talking about it. The Philadelphia Eagles are incredibly hateable. Honestly, they've gotten a little milder, I think, but like, the fans are rude as hell. They're brash. Like, it's so easy to hate the Eagles, right? But organizationally, by and large, they're a pretty good franchise. They're a pretty well-run franchise. Now, the Chip Kelly thing was a disaster, but they won a Super Bowl. They're the last NFC East team to win a Super Bowl. They're a playoff contender more often than not. In the last 20 years, it's undeniable to say that the Eagles are a better franchise than the Commanders, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The Indianapolis Colts, some of it was luck that they got Peyton and they got Luck. Not luck with luck,
nice.
But like, the Indianapolis Colts in the last 20 years, even though their owner is kind of a wild card with some weird, troubling transgressions in the past, but undeniable to say that the Colts are a better organization than the Commanders, right?
Also correct.
This dude had trouble with Philly and Indy, and now is coming here where there's always trouble.
If we want to get super dark, I mean, Wentz had the torn ACL in 2017, missed 5 games in 2018 with Philly, and then didn't play in 4 games in 2020. I think a couple were Jalen Hurts, and I think a couple was because Wentz was hurt. What if Wentz gets injured like Fitzpatrick did early on in the year, and then we just
I was going to point that out
again? Like, this could happen again.
Dude, I just tweeted that, dude. I think it'd be naive to think we don't see Taylor Heineke this fall or this season. Naive. Consider Washington's history at the quarterback position and consider Carson Wentz's history. Like, one of my knocks about trading for Jimmy G was you're probably still going to get 4 or 5 games of Taylor Heineke. And listen, Carson played 17 last year in Indy. Cool. But that's the first season he hasn't missed time, because even the season he played 16 games, he went out in the playoff game for Philly because he got a concussion on like the 3rd snap. Wentz has a live arm. He's a good athlete. He's made big time plays in the NFL before. One knock I had against the Shanahan organization was when they were scouting players, they only asked to see the good plays. They wanted the 5-10 best players from that kid when they were coming down to decision making. And their thought was, we will get the best out of this player, so let me see what their best is. I can understand the thought process. I think you kind of are with blinders on making those decisions. I think Ron Rivera is approaching this only wanting to look at the best of Carson Wentz, because the highlight reel is pretty good, especially if you chop it up over 6 seasons in the NFL. But I think you're approaching that with a very narrow worldview if you only want to talk about the best of Carson Wentz, because he's been quite good. It just not routinely. I also want to talk cap wise, because they got $33 million in space. They're going to get Wentz. That's $28 million. That knocks them all the way down to $5 million. Now, I think Collins either gets cut or restructured. I kind of starting to think more and more he gets cut. You're going to restructure him down to $4 million, because that's probably what you should be paying him. Maybe it's $6 million, but I think it's probably closer to 3.5, 4. I don't think he'll take that. I think he'd rather go see what he can get. There's not a ton of other moves to be made there. You get Sheriff coming off the books, but this takes them out of any big name free agent wideout. I was told over there that outside of a quarterback, don't expect any big moves, don't expect any headliners, and I kind of believe that. If I'm picking at 11, I'm going for the best wideout on the board then. But your cap situation has changed, and the McLaurin situation to me is no closer. I don't see Carson Wentz on what could be a 1-year rental making Terry want to lock in. I think what makes Terry want to lock in is $60 million or something.
More than that. Mike Williams got $60 million.
Yeah, but what's the guarantee on that? He got 3 at 20, right? So he probably got 40 guaranteed.
I think Terry and his camp have got to wait to see what this Davante Adams situation looks like. Once that contract, if that contract gets signed, once that contract gets signed, then you have a framework for where he's at. Obviously, he's not going to make Davante Adams money, but I think that represents the top end of where he is, and will give you a better idea of what they're going to be asking for.
Imagine telling an Eagles fan in 2017, when Wentz was an MVP candidate, that in 5 years Wentz will be in the NFC East playing for the Washington Commanders. That would be quite a conversation with a Philly fanatic. But yeah, and maybe he's Terry's best quarterback. I think if you copy and paste his 27 touchdowns and get better health on the offense, things can improve in the short term. But this team is always short term because they suck and need some immediate victories. The long term still looks as bleak as ever.
What did your guys' cell phones look like in the hour after the trade or up until now?
Phones?
Total show.
Yeah. It's a total show of people frustrated beyond belief.
Frustrated. Same with Twitter. The one thing that frustrates me is when someone texts 2 minutes after it happens, "Oh, Wentz to DC."
I love what do you think about Wentz at 2:07? Like, text me tomorrow, man. Got a lot going on. You know what's kind of interesting? If you look at the Colts last season and the Skins, the Commanders. So Terry had 77 for 153, 5 touchdowns. Mike Pittman had 88 for for 1082 and 6 touchdowns. Those are really pretty similar.
Yep.
Terry's doing it on a little less volume, so a little more YPC, but not a ton. Then it's a pair of running backs as their next receiver, and then as their leading receivers. And then it was Zach Pascal, who I think was at a Skins training camp once upon a time.
Correct.
As their second leading wideout is Pascal with 38 catches for 384 yards. The second leading wideout in Washington is Adam Humphries with 41 catches for 383 yards. Now, some of that is T.Y. Hilton missed a bunch of time. And Paris Campbell, I don't think was able to give them much. But like Washington, you can say the same thing. Curtis Samuel missed almost the damn whole season. There's a lot of similarities here. And it appears if I'm Terry, I don't think Terry will fall off because he's able to chuck the ball to Pittman a whole bunch. I mean, Michael Pittman had 129 targets last year. Terry had $130. Like it's eerily similar.
I had a point that I wanted to make, but I'm forgetting it right now.
The difference, I might say, is that John Taylor had 1,800 rushing yards and 18 touchdowns.
And another
That
400
seems to
yards
matter quite a
receiving.
bit.
Right. I mean, he had 2,000 yards for scrimmage. Everybody say
40
something
receptions.
nice. Let's
Yeah.
just all say something nice. Try for this trade, but just say something nice. I can start. Neither of you seem ready. Pete, are you ready?
I'm ready.
No, I'm not ready.
I'm
Mitch
ready.
is ready.
I think that the passing game weapons on the Commanders team are better than the Colts, and so you can look at if you look at the numbers.
How do you think that?
I think Terry's the best receiver on either team.
Okay.
I think Logan Thomas is a better tight end than Jack Doyle or whatever they were rolling out last year. I think those
Logan
two.
Thomas blew out his knee in December.
Okay, those two. I think the combination of Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick can equal Jonathan Taylor in the passing game only, just passing game. And
they got another 300 yards from Hines.
Yeah.
You are scraping, Mitchell. You are scraping for
I
something
think that
nice.
the passing game, I think the passing game targets are better in Washington than in Indianapolis. And for that reason, I will be optimistic that he will put up more passing yards and potentially more touchdowns in the burgundy and gold.
What's your nice thing, JP?
At least the NFL waived all COVID protocols, so we don't have to dealing with Carson Wentz and COVID. Here's my nice thing.
Oh, okay. That's actually a really important angle.
That's a way better one than mine.
Yeah, because yours was an outright lie, but it's fine. We're all doing what we can here.
We're trying to convince ourselves. Terry is the best offensive, the best pass catcher of anyone in between both teams.
I know JP tweeted that the Commanders Super Bowl odds fell, but I think this makes them relatively competitive in the division, maybe the second best team in the NFC East. And if Dallas falls off, I could see them being relevant in December.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
I think Pete's might be more malarkey than mine, but
no, dude, they won 7 games last year with Heineke. I think and more importantly, I think the defense sucked last year. And I think defense has way more variance, but I think the defense should perform better because they're not playing the same kind of murderer's row of quarterbacks they were. So the defense is a little bit better, and maybe Wentz is a little bit better. I think you're talking 9-10 wins. I think, dude, they almost made the damn playoffs last year. I mean, let's not forget that week 17, if they beat the Eagles and they were in that game, they had a crazy COVID outbreak. Like, I think your take is by far the worst of the 3 nice takes.
The one thing I'll say is this:
the fact that you had to rely on a COVID thing to find something positive tells you how far you had to reach for yours.
But mine was factual.
This reminds me of the search for a name. We knew the options. No one liked any of them. And once, they ruled out Red Wolves, aka Russell Wilson, it was just time to choose one and get the familiarizing process started. Wentz is like the Commanders of quarterback options. He's fine. Maybe it can be okay, but it's not really going to make anyone do somersaults and backflips.
Uninspiring.
Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we expected, honestly. All right. I gotta go. I gotta get the phone.
Yeah, you have to go do lots of new stuff. We'll have plenty more Wentz pods. We're going to talk to Eagles writers, Colts writers. We'll have a Wentz presser at some point. So this is just the beginning of the Carson Wentz era, March 9th, 2022.
Traylon Burks at 11. You made it this far. I owe you a beer.